I know everyone's favorite part about theme parks is waiting in line. So for that reason, today we're going to rank the top 10 worst queues to wait in at the Disneyland Resort. I spend so much time at Disneyland. I've waited in all of these queues countless times, so I know them all like the back of my hand. And today we're going to rank up my least favorites. But first we're going to ask the question, what makes a bad queue? The most obvious answer is a slow moving queue. Like, I hate when lines take forever. So attraction capacity is 100% going to be a factor in this video, whether that's like service rate of the actual attraction or the amount of lightning lanes that Disney gives out. Another factor that makes a good queue is theming. Obviously these are Disney parks, so theming is kind of an expectation, and when you're waiting in a queue and it's not well themed at all, it's pretty boring. Like, the best queues have stuff to look at to distract you, keep you off your phone and in the environment that you paid to be in. And then the third aspect that I heavily consider is music. Sometimes queue music could get too distracted and placed in a different world, and other times it can be straight up annoying. So today we're going to rank up my 10 least favorite queues at Disneyland. Before we get started, please like this video, please leave a comment down below, and please subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'm a pretty small theme park channel, so I would greatly appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Starting things off with number 10 is It's a Small World. This queue was actually redone a few years ago. It's pretty much just a big cattle pin now, but it's like off to the side and it's in the shade. Usually it's not full. During Small World Holiday, it'll be full, but during classic Small World it's usually not. Maybe you'll have to wait in like half of it, but even then it's still pretty boring. Like, the facade for Small World is very, very impressive, and the queue is way off to the side, so you can't even look at the facade while you're in line, but I do appreciate that it is shaded. Moving on to number 9, also in Fantasyland, is Matterhorn. Just like Small World, Matterhorn had a refurbished queue a few years ago. It used to just wrap all the way around the mountain, but now they have a couple switchbacks in front of the station. And then if they need extended queue, then they have the extended queue wrap around the mountain. I haven't seen it, like, it used to reach like the monorail track, like all the way near Tomorrowland, but these days it's usually very rare to see it reach the Nemo Lagoon. Like, it has to be a real busy day to get that bad. I do like this queue better than the Small World queue because I feel like it has better atmosphere. If the extended queue is open, you have a good view of the Tomorrowland track, especially the turnaround into the brake run. It also does have good atmosphere because of the like yodeling. Like, the music is pretty cool. I mean, Small World has It's a Small World, but I prefer the Matterhorn music. I just feel more connected to it. I don't think the Small World music is irritating, but it's just, I don't know, you have to be in a specific mood to vibe to It's a Small World. One thing I forgot to mention is the fact that the exit is like directly in the queue for the Tomorrowland track. Like, after you get off the ride, if the line is long enough, you literally have to split the queue that you already waited in. That's a little awkward. That's not great at all. I don't like that. One of the downsides is that they made a majority of the queue wheelchair accessible, but the finale, the last part of the queue where you split up from the Tomorrowland and Fantasyland track, those last two switchbacks before you get into your bobsled are very, very thin. So it's like one across, which is not ideal. Like, it's a little claustrophobic, but it doesn't bother me. I'm sure it bothers a few people. It's just not ideal. Also, I don't like when the merge point between Lightning Lane and Standby happens when you split up the queue. So this is a concept that might be a little difficult to explain, but Matterhorn has two different queues and it also has two different tracks. And those two queues are Lightning Lane and Standby, and they never merge together fully. So that means that 0% of your wait is gonna be served at the attraction's 100% capacity. So in the case of Matterhorn, Standby, you're either put in line for the Tomorrowland side or the Fantasyland side, but so is Lightning Lane. So Lightning Lane is taking away capacity from Standby for both sides. And then once you're assigned a side, obviously the rest of the line is only 50% of the attraction's capacity, because you're no longer in line for both sides, you're in line for one side. So it's gonna go half as slow as it was earlier. But that's not entirely true because Lightning Lane was taking away some of the service rate from the Standby line. So in a perfect world, most of your line will be 100% of the attraction's service rate. I don't know if I did a good job explaining that, but Matterhorn and It's a Small World both have the merge point and the split at the same time. So you don't get to have that. An attraction that does merge and doesn't split is number 8, which is Spider-Man. So Lightning Lane and Standby merge before the pre-show, and then the pre-show happens, and then the rest of the queue leads you to the station, and it's one station, so you don't split up. So that final section of the queue, when you're in line for that part, the line is being served at 100% of the attraction's capacity, which is nice. So that's the one upside about this queue. But in my opinion, the outdoor queue is very, very, very ugly. Just like Matterhorn and Small World, it is outdoors. It is pretty well shaded, but it's just not ideal. Like, it's a lot of concrete. Most of the theming is like posters on the wall, which is kind of boring. In my opinion, it's just not a good queue. It also moves pretty slowly, even after the merge point and the pre-show. Like, this ride just isn't the highest capacity thing, so it's just not a great queuing experience. And this ride does draw a crowd, which kind of boggles my mind sometimes. Speaking of low capacity, number 7 is Goofy's Sky School. This queue isn't necessarily bad, it's just pretty much a shaded cattle pin, and cattle pins are boring. At least Spider-Man had the posters. Like, Goofy only has like one poster near the end. Like, if this ride has a really long line, then you're gonna be out by the trees in Paradise Gardens Park, which is cute, but it's just very generic. And as I said, it is a low capacity attraction, so the line is not gonna move that fast. It also has Lightning Lane, and sometimes when I'm in line for this attraction, there's just way too many Lightning Lane guests. So like, the standby line barely moves. Sometimes it's like this whole line is just for like all the Lightning Lane guests just take all of the capacity, which is absolutely not ideal. Moving on to number 6, this is probably the oldest queue in this video, or one of the oldest. It is the Mad Tea Party. So this one is very, very thin. It's just like the final section of the queue for Matterhorn. It's just like one by one, and it's around a big tree. So it's a very narrow queue, and you just go around the tree a few times, and then you go down closer to the teacups. Because of the nature of this attraction, it swallows up a whole bunch of guests at the same time. And the ride cycle is pretty long, so sometimes the queue can be rather annoying. It is the most shaded out of the queues that we've talked about. Even Goofy, Matterhorn, and Small World all have good shade, but this one has by far the best shade because that tree is just so big. So that is pretty nice. But because it's so narrow and it's pretty bland, it's probably one of the weakest queues in the park, and I'm sure it makes some people uncomfortable because it's just so narrow. The 5th worst queue, also in Fantasyland, is Peter Pan's Flight. This ride gets a crazy wait time. It's kind of insane. I don't understand why people are obsessed with this ride. Like, it's a cool gimmick riding under the track, but like, is it that cool that you're willing to wait 45 minutes on a regular basis? Like, the ride vehicles in this attraction only seat 2 people, when Snow White's Enchanted Wish and Pinocchio's Daring Journey can seat up to 4. So it's kind of a shame that the most popular Fantasyland Dark ride only has 2 people per ride vehicle. Like, that's insanely low for a Disney park. Like, obviously this attraction was designed without today's crowds in mind, but it's still absolutely ridiculous. And it doesn't help that the physical queue is really, really boring. Like, most of it is just kind of like chains. Like, it feels very temporary and thrown together. Like, it's not supposed to have this long of a line, but it constantly does. Like, this line never goes away. You show up here in the morning, it has a huge wait. You stay till closing, it still has a huge wait. Like, it's insane. I don't understand. People really love this ride, and they're willing to wait an insane amount of time for it. It's an absolutely overrated attraction, and the queuing experience sucks because it moves so slow. There's like nothing to look at. Like, obviously you're in Fantasyland, and Fantasyland is charming, but in terms of Peter Pan specific theming, there's pretty much nothing. Like, you look at Peter Pan's Flight in Magic Kingdom, and they have like a whole indoor section that's like pretty well done. Like, we don't have anything like that because we don't have the space for that. So that's just kind of a bummer. But this is probably the slowest moving line in the park. So for that reason, it has to rank in the top 5 worst queues at the bare minimum. Moving on to number 4, also in Fantasyland, we have the Storybook Land canal boats. So this queue is very, very bland. It's pretty much on the dock. Like, it's just a bunch of switchbacks. So we love cattle pins in this video. We love going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's totally not grating and exhausting, and there's just like zero charm to it. And just like every other queue in Fantasyland, it is pretty narrow, so it's just not ideal at all. But I promise you, this is the last entry from Fantasyland in this video. Moving on to number 3, we're hopping over to DCA for Incredicoaster. This queue is really, really disappointing. When they made the transition from California Screamin' to Incredicoaster, they added the section where the Fast Pass distribution kiosks used to be for California Screamin'. They made it part of the queue. And this queue is just gray and dull. Like, it has posters for the Incredibles when you get closer to the station, but the whole thing is a massive cattle pin. It is really boring. I will say that this is probably the fastest moving line out of all of them that we've talked about, but the quality of the queue is so bad that it ranks this high. Like, it's kind of an eyesore, honestly. Like, gray, orange, there's red for the Incredibles. It's just kind of a mess. Doesn't look great at all, in my opinion. They could have done much better. Like, the California Screamin' queue wasn't that much better, but I mean, I might take it over this, because this is like stylized to be ugly in my opinion. Some of you might appreciate the colors, but I don't know. I don't think it works well at all. Cattle pin queues are so exhausting, and this thing is just a massive cattle pin. Probably one of the biggest at the resort. I do appreciate the Incredibles music though. The Incredibles have a great score, and they play it in line for this roller coaster, so I do appreciate that, but it's just not good. The queuing experience is pretty bad. Going over to number 2, this one kind of breaks my heart because this is one of my favorite attractions in the resort. It is Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. So obviously the final section of the queue with the video and like when you're actually in the Collector's Fortress, that part is really cool. Like, they have animatronics and stuff, but the outdoor queue sucks. Just like Incredicoaster, this is a massive cattle pin. It is very large. You just go back and forth like a dozen times before you go inside. And unlike Incredicoaster, the music that they play in this queue is like straight up annoying. Like, it's like they're trying to make it annoying for you. It's like the collector's assistant or whatever will come over the PA and she'll be like, we're gonna play pieces from the collector's audio collection. And then it's just like rats like fighting each other at some point. Like, some of the music is just straight up annoying. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, there's very few pieces that aren't annoying. So I don't know what the goal was there. Like, your guests are waiting in line, so they're already annoyed. Why are you playing strange noises that are just so, I don't know. It makes me upset. I'm just like, why am I listening to this right now, you know? Why is this being played over the speakers? And just like Matterhorn and Small World, 0% of this line is merged together. So you have the merge point between Lightning Lane and Standby inside, and then you immediately split up. The left side you board upstairs, and the right side you board downstairs. So if you're in the Standby line, you're never gonna be waiting in a line that's being served by 100% of the attraction's capacity. So that means it is not the fastest moving line in the park. This attraction is also not the highest capacity thing, which is a shame because it's very popular and it's so much fun. I've been on this ride way too many times. It's one of my favorite rides of all time, to be honest, but the queue sucks. And I promise you, if anyone would know that, it would be me, because I've waited in it over 100 times. That's not even a joke. But moving on to number 1 is Space Mountain. So this one is very interesting because the thing that ranks it so high for me is honestly the wasted potential, which is the most frustrating. Because the Star Tunnel in Space Mountain's queue in Florida, probably one of my favorite sections of queue ever. Like, I love the Star Tunnel music in Florida. I listen to it all the time. It's just like perfect theme park music. It's very atmospheric, puts you in the mood to ride Space Mountain. And the queue music in Disneyland is much more eerie, borderline scary, which is not the vibe that Space Mountain should be, in my opinion. Like, you can play that for Ghost Galaxy, but Ghost Galaxy is gone now, rest in peace. So I don't think the Disneyland Space Mountain queue music works that well at all. Like, if you search on YouTube queue music for Space Mountain, the Florida one is gonna pop up because it's just way better. Even outside of the Star Tunnel, like, the music for Space Mountain in Florida is so good. Off-ride, I should say. There is no on-ride music. That's where our Space Mountain thrives, on-ride with the music, because we actually have a score designed specifically for this layout. But this video isn't talking about the ride experience. We're just looking at the queue. The Space Mountain queue music sucks. It's also a massive cattle pin, but unlike Mission Breakout and Incredicoaster, this cattle pin is indoors. And the third reason that this ranks at number 1 is because it moves so slow. Disney gives out way too many lightning lanes for Space Mountain. At points, the standby line like never moves, and when it does move, it barely moves. So Space Mountain is 100% my least favorite queue to wait in the entire park, just because it moves so slowly. Even if it's posted at a reasonable wait time, like 30-45 minutes, like that's a fine wait time for one of the park's most popular attractions, but waiting in it sucks because it just moves so slow. And then you're in that cattle pin and the music is just kind of eerie. It doesn't feel magical at all. So once again, the wasted potential, the cattle pin, and the slow moving nature of the queue is why it ranks at number 1. I will say though that after you merge, there's a good chunk of the queue where 100% of the attraction's capacity is moving your line. So that's really nice, but you have to suffer to get to that point. It's really, really bad. There have been plenty of times in this queue where I've wanted to die. So it's just not it. And those are my top 10 least favorite queues at the Disneyland Resort. What'd you think of this video? Do you agree with this list? Is there anything you'd switch around? Is there a different queue that I should have included, like Midway Mania? Please let me know down in the comments below. Please like, comment, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you later.